Welcome everyone. We're back at the Agile Coach Exchange after our summer break. It's September. Um, with our Agile community online, it sometimes feels that we're getting more and more into segmented spaces and segmented bubbles. Whether it's people ever whittling the Agile coaching role and saying, well, I'm just an Agile delivery manager and I only talk about this very narrow aspect of Agile delivery, or whether it's people with their own very thinly put together IP, where the answer to everything is their very, very thinly put together IP. I don't think it's a very good place to be in. And it was really good when we had Roman Pichler with us a few months ago. He recommended that we speak to Rich, who we've got tonight. And the it sometimes feels that the product perspective is missed a little bit. And it's really, really great to have Rich here helping us with that aspect. So I'm going to hand over to him
Great,
now. Give a very warm ACE welcome for Rich Mironov.
great, thanks. And I'm joining you from the suburbs of Lisbon in Portugal. As you can tell from my accent, I'm a native Portuguese. Uh, Good, good. So I'm going to throw some slides up here. It's a pretty small group, so what I'd suggest is if you've got a an urgent question or a strong comment to make, just jump right in, or we'll save time at the end. But if I haven't riled us all up and offended a few of you before we're done, then we're not doing a good job. So let me grab this. Here we go. And so here's a talk I've given a few times. I tend to be in the product community. I'll do some introductions beyond that. I've been doing Agile stuff since about 2005, mostly in Silicon Valley. Uh, but
Um,
uh, but but from the product side of Agile or the Agile side of product, your choice. Right. Good. And we're going to talk about this gent with the beer in his hand because it's pretty important, but not quite yet. And well, let me go do the introductions, and that'll frame up why this is my topic. Okay. So I've been doing product jobs since the late 1980s. In case anybody thought this was new, it's not. So I had my first product management job in 1988. You can count on your fingers. I was about 6 years old because I can't possibly be that old. Um, and most of that, almost all of that, has been what I would call the commercial side, which is companies that build software as their product for money as opposed to companies that are building systems and software for internal use. So not banks, not airlines, not government agencies, but software companies proper is where I've spent most of my time. And within that, mostly in the B2B enterprise space, which is where people put together big pieces of software to sell to big corporations for very large tickets, right? And if you don't sell them, you're all fired and you lose your job. Right. I was a software developer way back in the day. I wrote some COBOL for Hewlett Packard in the 1981, 2, 3, if anybody's old enough to remember those. But um, we'll be talking about the product side of the problem, and I'll try to differentiate that carefully from the engineering or the delivery side because that's not my expertise, although I dearly love all the folks on my teams who do that work, and they're the majority of folks out in the world. So I'm from the little segment of people who are product first rather than engineering or delivery first. 6 Silicon Valley B2B startups. 4 of those we file under life lessons and good character building. Um, and I've done a whole series, 15 of what we call the smoke jumper jobs, which is I've come into a company as the interim or temporary chief product officer because they forgot to have one or they misplaced the last few or they don't know why everybody's quitting. So I call myself a small A agilist as distinct from any particular brand. You're not going to have me selling, Scrum versus Kanban. I won't talk much about SAFe because I'm not much of a fan of it, but I try not to be dogmatic about the flavors of Agile, and I defer to the engineering and the delivery folks for how we're going to organize that work because I don't think that's where I add the value. Um, Again, doing a long time. I started a blog in the space in 2001. Yes, there were blogs in the space. I do have a book out on doing product management. And these days, what I do is I actually coach. I'm a one-on-one coach for the chief product officers at B2B enterprise software companies. So my living these days is helping the most senior product person at the software company deal with their go-to-market peers And for those who need a definition here, go-to-market is marketing, sales, finance, and all the folks who are not in the R&D or engineering or delivery organization. Generally, when we've come up through product or engineering or design, we really have great relationships and we understand the folks who build. I call us makers, right? Developers, designers, test engineers, documentation folks, all the folks who actually make things that go into the product are on the maker side. The challenges that almost all chief product officers have are not on the maker side. They're on the go-to-market side. They're on the side of the VP of engineering, I'm sorry, the VP of sales, who predictably every Tuesday drops a bomb on the roadmap, blows it up because we have a lead on a really big deal that needs a special thing. All of you have been there. The chief product officer is the one who takes that in the chest, right, or the head, or whatever body part it is. So much of my work is how do we deal with, how do we understand, how do we communicate with the go-to-market side of the business so that we can get more of the right things done, right, and leave the finer points about how we're building to the experts in how we're building, because that's not me. Right? We good? All right, let's go. And then I wanted to make one other distinction because I think it's really useful here. And it's one that I present to the product folks all the time. I want to make a distinction between something I'm going to call product waste and something I call engineering waste. Okay. So as a product person, I'm not responsible for, and I can't fix engineering waste. It's out of my scope. But almost all the waste I see isn't engineering waste. Let me tell you what it is. If we build something that the market doesn't want and doesn't use, it doesn't matter what the quality is or whether we delivered it on time or what method we used, it's product waste because it's not going to achieve, right? So when we think about product waste, here are things that come to the top of my list, right? We build a feature and it's beautiful and it's well tested and it's on time and the algorithms are beautiful and almost no one uses it. Okay, not engineering waste, it's product waste. What do we have here? We are tasked with a process improvement or a product improvement or something that the business says it needs, and we deliver it, and it doesn't actually provide the process improvement that we hoped. Okay, not an engineering failure, not a delivery failure, not a design failure. It's a product failure because we built the wrong thing. What else do we have here? Anytime, and I'll overstate this a little bit. Anytime we abandon a product or project or release in the middle because we're being interrupted to do something else, we all know that within a week or two or three, all of the work is going to be mostly wasted and forgotten and put aside. So anytime we're in a system where there's constant interrupts, where in my case, the sales organization gets to nominate the next thing, call the CEO, and drive it through so that we're going to drop all the planned work and run to the next disaster or shiny thing, mostly product waste, right? We may come back to it later, but it's pretty hard to start where we were. And so the chief product officer at these companies is the person who tries their best to shield the overall R&D organization from the random perturbations of whatever the rest of the execs thought of in the shower this morning, right? Or the last phone call they got, right? ADHD should come to mind. Okay. I'm sure none of you have been here, but every single exec in the company has just a short list of tiny little things, none of which are short, none of which are tiny. And they go around all the planning processes and they call their favorite engineers or teams and they stick things in, right? Which aren't well thought of, which aren't well designed, which don't matter, which aren't going to use. I see a lot of organizations losing 20, 30, 40, 50% of all of their effort on long lists of small interrupts, which weren't well thought out or designed or chosen. And of course, we miss everything on the roadmap because half of everything we do wasn't planned and wasn't useful, right? For me, and for the folks I coach, this is where the product folks need to put on our Teflon suits and stand between the random people with random interrupts and the folks actually building what we've agreed to build. There might be one more here, right? And the one we're going to talk about more here is we're going to start a big major piece of work. I usually talk in terms of the cost of a team. In the US, every team, 6 people plus a product manager and designer, 8 people would cost between $1 million and $1.5 million a year, right? That's important because when we say we're going to do this transformation, we're going to rewrite all of our systems, it's going to take 20 teams 2 years. We don't think to do the multiplication. Notice that that's $30 million. Now, wherever geography you are, the numbers are going to be different, but order of magnitude, it's similar. If we're going to start some piece of work and it's going to cost the company millions of euros or millions of dollars or millions of pounds, and we haven't sat down before we start the work to figure out how we're going to show that it's useful and how we're going to measure success, then I see that as a fundamental product failure because we're not getting in front of the process enough to make sure that the things coming in make useful sense. And when I do audits with a lot of my clients, what we discover is that fully half of everything we built is product waste. Doesn't matter if it came in on time, doesn't matter if it was high quality, doesn't matter if it met the specs, it doesn't achieve in the market, it doesn't achieve in the company, and therefore we shouldn't have done it. Notice that's a different question than how can we be more effective or efficient doing the things we've agreed to do. Go ahead, Claire, you had a question, right? No. All right, somebody's going to jump in. I'll take a breath, right? Really important distinction for me because as the product leader at the company, I want to use the scarce, actually the scarcest resource in the entire universe is the attention and time of our delivery and R&D and design teams, right? And we waste it like crazy because we don't do the work up front and we don't push back on the other parts of the business, right? And that's my job. All right, let's keep going. So here's the quick agenda. What do the folks across the aisle from me and you actually care about? That's useful because most of us have spent our careers trying to educate folks on the go-to-market side about what we do. I'm going to tell you that's not the best use of our time. And then I'm going to introduce something called money stories. Notice these are not user stories. They're money stories. And it's how the go-to-market side talks, right? And then a couple of tools. We good? All right. So here's the picture you saw. Why am I putting up this picture? Okay. Has anybody ever been at a social event or a cocktail party where this guy is, you see he's got a golf hat and a golf shirt and a beer in his hand and he's very enthusiastic. And he's intent on trapping you in a corner of this cocktail party and spending 40 minutes telling you how excited he is about golf and the green jackets and whether the Scots or the Americans have better courses and who's on the leaderboard. Anybody ever been in that cocktail party? Right? Okay. It doesn't actually matter what the topic is. What's important here is that he's going to spend 30 minutes of your life in great detail telling you all about something that you have zero interest in. And you're going to do your best either to duck underneath or chew your arm off or whatever it is to escape from this thing because he's failed to ask the question up front. How interested are you in golf? Right now, my side, this would be the Star Trek versus Star Wars argument that we've been having for a few decades. There's an awful lot of people in the world who actually don't care about that distinction. And it would be really handy for me to ask that question first before we spend the next half hour on it, right? Why am I putting this picture up? Anybody? I'm going to turn the tables on us slightly. And I'm going to suggest that when we, as Agile professionals and Agile coaches and Agile advocates, pull the go-to-market executives aside and try to educate them about why Agile's good and the details of the processes, we are these people. And they could care less about the discussion. They happen to be usually in the power position where they can end it much more quickly than the 40 minutes. But my observation over and over and over again, 3.5 decades of doing this, is that our go-to-market executives are actually not at all interested in the Agile question. Yet we think it's really, really important for us to educate them, to bring them along, to explain the transformation, to bring them into the teams and the stand-ups and the activities and show them the maps, right? And there are occasions for that, and I know we've all been in some good ones, but I'm going to suggest that most of the time, it's just that not that useful. right? And for us to consume our energy and their time on that without checking to see if it's of interest to them, I think it's a waste, right? And so let me just fill this one in a little bit. What is it that our go-to-market executives are interested in? Anybody know? Jump in, somebody. Don't think too hard. They're execs and they're on the marketing side and the sales side. Steve.
Money.
Money would be a really good start, right? Okay. So um, uh, we're going to get to money in a sec. When we talk about agile, and I've done the same thing for decades, I'm going to put some phrases down here that we are all going to recognize. And I'm going to tell you that our audience for this will hear them as excuses instead of education. All right. Anybody? Anybody ever said these words? Right. Okay. The reason that the executives believe we have a backlog form is because they're going to fill out the form, and then we are going to agree to do the thing and tell them when it's going to be ready, right? We call this the deli counter model. Okay. I want a sandwich. I want it to have ham and this kind of cheese and lots of mustard and no mayonnaise and tomatoes or not and lettuce. Most of the execs on the go-to-market side believe that we are order takers, and they expect if they fill out the form, the question is, how quickly are you going to tell me I'm going to get my thing? Right now, I know, and by the way, all of you know, that if you go look at the size of the backlog, it's usually 20 to 50 times our throughput. Okay. So your typical backlog is 20 years to 40 years worth of development. And we add things to the backlog faster than we're taking them off. So I know, and I hope you know, that we're never going to do 95% of all the things in the backlog because it's just the laws of physics, right? But when we put up a form and say fill out the form, the assumption on the other side is if I fill out the form, you're going to give me what I want, right? Okay, let's keep going. Anybody ever said this? By the way, it's true. It's true of every engineering group I've ever been in. You can call it delivery, you can call it R&D. There is no white space. We're all overcommitted, but the executives across the aisle hear that as an excuse because it's generic. Okay, let's keep going. This is also true, and I've said it 100 times. There's a thing I call roadmap amnesia. Anybody know about roadmap amnesia? It's caused by any phone call to any major customer, to any executive on the go-to-market side, asking for a thing that's not on the roadmap, and it immediately wipes their brains of all of the updates we've given them about what's coming next. And so they come to us and they say, I need a thing, right? Well, yes, but the most important things are already on the roadmap. Yes, but I still need a thing, right? It's true on our side, but it sounds like an excuse. I've said this. You guys probably haven't said this. Anybody? Right? We rearrange some priorities. We're bringing the release out on time, but the one thing you need isn't there. Right? Let's keep going. Anybody ever said this? Okay. Now let's frame it up. I'm an enterprise salesperson. I'm going to get a 6-digit commission check if I close this deal. If I don't close this deal, I'm going to be fired. Okay. And some really clever person from the delivery or R&D or product side says the product wasn't intended to do that. Anybody know what my behavior is? Gosh, you guys are quiet. Come on. Anybody? The answer is I'm going to sign the deal and I'm going to take the commission. I may not be at the company next year anyway when this all comes to roost. This is really, really important to us as designers and as product folks and as delivery folks and as engineers, right? It's not important to the folks who sign contracts. Okay, one last one. Anybody ever said this? Okay. I will claim that any sentence that comes out of your mouth that doesn't have a currency symbol in it can't be heard by any executive on the go-to-market side of the company, right? And tech debt is a concept that has very little validity across the aisle because they're not interested. Okay, have I depressed anybody yet? Okay, let's keep going. So I'm going to present some alternatives, of course, right? But this is really important because what I did for years and what many of us do all the time is we think of ourselves as smarter than the folks across the aisle, and that they need educating and that they're excited by the opportunity. Not so much. Okay, so what do they care about? And I have cookies here. Why do I have cookies here? Because anybody who's had a 5-year-old at the evening meal who says, I want the sweets and the dessert and the cookie first, and I'll eat my vegetables later, knows just how executives on the go-to-market side think, right? Your other choice here, by the way, is anybody ever house trained a puppy? Okay. If your puppy pees on the carpet and then you immediately give your puppy a treat, what's the next thing that happens? Okay. Now compare that to the enterprise sales team that just closed a deal in 7 figures and you paid them 6 figures as a commission and you told them there was tech debt. Okay. They're off in Aruba right now and they're not listening. Okay. So what do they, short-term revenue, we all know this. Customers make requirements and the assumption is incorrectly that the customers know exactly what they need and the sales team writes down the words and gives you the post-it note and says, this is what we need, right? By the way, the customers told them it's not that hard. You guys know this, right? It's probably only 10 lines of code. We can get it in next week, right? And so we went ahead and signed the contract that said we're going to deliver teleportation in our next release and nothing's going to slip, right? Um, uh, right? And the other thing they're really looking for is fewer escalations, which is let's not have anything break. In the B2B space where I live, what's really important here is, in general, these are deals worth 6 and 7 and 8 figures. There's usually only 7 or 8 of them at the top of the list each quarter. And not only does the sales VP know their name and the CEO knows their names, the board of directors knows the names of every single deal that's pending and only calls the CEO once a week each to ask about them. This is not the consumer space where everybody signs up for 10 euros a month for a dating application, right? And so with a very small number of deals, there's tremendous pressure to say yes to whatever crazy thing they wanted, because otherwise people get fired. Okay. Not so interested in the process discussion. And again, just telling you what the other side hears, true or otherwise. Mostly they hear that as, why can't I have what I want? Because you guys put this really complicated system in place, right? And if we could just clear out all the systems and I could get right to the engineers, I could get what I needed because it's really important to me, right? We all been here? Okay, sorry to paint it so bleakly, but this is my life, right? So we're gonna switch now and talk about something I call money stories. Again, the theory here is if there's not a currency symbol in the sentence, as the chief product officer, nothing I say will be heard, right? And my job is to shield the rest of the maker organization from the chaos and short-term thinking that I just described, right? So we're going to introduce something called money stories, and here's how they work. Euros, because I'm in Portugal here, right? It's a swag, it's a guess, it's a made up number that we do at the beginning of the work, not at the end, right? And so it's not a financial projection. It's 2 to 3 numbers we're going to multiply. Here's the rule: no more than 3 numbers, and the only operator is the multiply operator. And it's a way to get a arm's length order of magnitude. Can I guess how big this thing is? Guess before we start the work, before we commit the work, and before we set the priorities. Notice it has nothing to do with how hard it is. It's everything to do with whether it's going to be useful. Everybody with me? This is not science. We're not going to do Pareto analysis here or Monte Carlo simulations. Okay, so we're going to try to guess at 3 numbers that tell us whether something is worth even discussing, and vaguely how big it is so we can make trade-offs between things without first going back and sizing the work. Okay, so, and by the way, this is just the way that we do sales forecasts at these companies. So if you think you're in trouble because the rest of the company is more accurate, you're not asking the right questions of the folks on the go-to-market side who are making it up every day, right? And yet they got promoted and they're in those jobs. Okay, so let's paint a few of these, right? I'll tell you the story first. I don't know why it's Kiwi Bank. I love New Zealand. So I'm going to tell you a value story for a customer. And it happens to be a big bank. And I'm from some company, and here's what we do. Do we still send out envelopes with pre-approved credit cards in your geographies? We used to do this in the US all the time, right? And the hint was they only mailed it to people that they wanted to take the credit. They didn't mail it to people with bad credit. right? There's online equivalents here. And so these banks would send out hundreds of thousands or millions of envelopes every year to the people they wanted to take credit cards with. Um, and our special software, and you're going to notice that the tech doesn't matter and doesn't appear here, our special software will help this big bank run those credit checks more efficiently, or fewer of those credit checks, and the bank will spend less money on credit checks to send the same number of envelopes out. By the way, this is generic. This is every business story you've ever seen, right? Anybody want to, somebody take yourself off mute, and I'm going to need the three numbers that we're going to multiply that are going to tell this bank how much money they're going to save if they buy our thing. And you don't have to know anything about banking. Anybody want, Ben, you want to be brave? Three numbers.
Not much of a gambler.
Okay, anybody want to try?
Current credit limit.
Yeah, okay, maybe almost. You're thinking too hard. Okay, let's do it
How
for
many
you.
credit checks you run?
Exactly. How many credit checks you
going
run?
to be reduced by,
and
how much each of them costs.
Ding, ding, ding. Liz gets a free book from me. Liz, you'll send me an email later and I'll send you a copy of my book. Okay. That's exactly right. Notice we didn't care about the tech and we don't have to know anything about banking. What we have to do is we have to say, you do this many credit checks a year and they cost you this much. And we will claim on no evidence that we're going to reduce it by some percentage. Right. And if we multiply those three things together, we get how much this company's going to save if they buy our thing. Right. Now, there's one other number that's really important if we're in the commercial software business. Anybody? Don't think too hard. Think like salespeople. We're going to want money for this, right? There's a price, and hint, the price needs to be less than how much they're going to save, or they won't buy it. And so we're going to charge you some amount. And if you divide the amount you saved by the amount we charge, you get your return on investment. Right? Not hard. And by the way, it doesn't have to be exact. This is, if you got within a factor of 8, it would be good enough, right? This is a generic B2B value story. Notice it's about the customer and making money. We're not yet on the R&D side, right? We're going to do one more. Okay. They're all the same. Okay. We sell something that helps your knowledge management system, your support team close tickets out faster and answer support calls faster. By the way, it doesn't matter what it is, right? So we have a knowledge management system, and if you put our knowledge management system in, your folks would save a lot of time closing cases. Anybody besides Liz want to guess the three numbers? All right, it's awfully quiet. We're going to keep going because we don't want. Okay, you currently take how many support calls a year? And what does it cost you per support call? That's usually some hourly rate times how long the support calls take, right? And we're going to reduce that by some amount. And when we multiply those three things together, we get how much you're going to save if you buy our knowledge management system, and it doesn't matter how it works, right? Ideally, we're going to charge less than the 190 to 250K, right? Every product that's ever sold to business needs this story. And notice we have to have the story before we start the work, or we won't know whether we can make money selling the product. Okay, is there one more here? Right, and we're going to charge you some amount. Generally, you can get about 10% of the savings or 10% of the upside, right? Pricing really matters. Notice that these are how we as product folks need to tell the story through our sales team. So someone will mail money into our company or, IBAN it or whatever it is, wherever your banking system is, right? If we as product folks can't tell this story, we shouldn't build this product. Likewise, if we can't explain how this is going to save some money internally for the company, we shouldn't do the project, right? And it's upfront. It's not afterwards. It's not we forgot to figure out how to measure it and it's too late, right? Let's do an internal one. Oh, internal money stories. Okay, right. So these are we're going to save or make money somehow. Sometimes these are revenue generators. So let's imagine you've got a software product and it's got 3 subscription tiers, bronze, silver, gold. And we're going to invent some really cool feature that gets a lot of folks to trade up from the bronze package to the silver package. Anybody want to tell me what it's worth? Don't think too hard. 3 numbers we're going to multiply. All right, we're just going to go. So we're going to say something like, well, how many customers are in the bronze plan? And what's our upsell price? And we're going to completely make up a guess or a range for how many of them are going to trade up, right? And we're going to discover that there's no money in this one because we don't think very many are going to trade up, or we're putting too low a price on it, right? Let's take we're going to save tech support, right? Okay. Oh, we're going to open up a new market, right? We're going to make this up, right? How big is the available market? And what's our guess for how much of it we're going to get in the first year, right? And I've underlined the guesses because if we can get within an order of magnitude, that's enough for executives to make decisions about go, no go, right? Is there one more? There might be. Okay, internal cost savings, right? We're going to do a thing and it's going to save us money. How many hours is going to save, and what do we pay people by the hour, and what's our guess for the percentage improvement? Okay. Notice these are not exact, and they're not forecasts, and they're not financial numbers. They are swags. But we want them before we start the project, before we agree on the product, because we're going to discover that almost everything that comes in doesn't make any financial sense. And if we do the work up front, instead of telling people we don't want to do it or we're busy, we can tell them it makes no damn money sense. And they go away having spoken the language that they understand. You with me? And you're going to say, well, who does this? And I'm going to tell you that my folks do it, but let's keep going. Okay, so do I have another example here? We're at a company, we sell software. We're losing 40% of our customers every year to churn. And we know what that costs because the folks over in marketing and sales tell us. And we say, oh gosh, we're losing 65 million euros a year because our churn is so terrible. Now we have a reason to have a project to reduce churn. Okay, because if we could make it better, we could tell them that it's worth it. Likewise, if we could save 4% of the churn, we could make an extra 6 million a year. People are paying attention now because the sentences include currency symbols. All right, let's keep going. Anybody ever said these words? Okay, hopefully not in those exact words, right? Notice there's no numbers in here. Okay, so as a product person, I'm going to send it back until somebody on my team puts some numbers in like this. Okay, we got 9,000 folks in the silver and bronze customers. We think 3 to 6% might buy this thing if we added telepathy. And here's what the license is worth, right? It's as simple as I can make it. Let's keep going. All right, so I call it counting the digits. And the reason I call it counting the digits is because I will claim that all of you and I and everybody who's ever worked for me in the product side can get to within the right number of digits for what something is worth. If it's a 5-digit idea, we might save or make tens of thousands of euros or dollars a year. Notice I don't care what the leading number is. If it's a 7-digit idea, we might make or save millions of euros or dollars or pounds a year. And if it's a 9-digit idea, we're in the hundreds of millions. I'm going to tell you that with 5 minutes of back of the envelope, we can figure out if it's a 5-digit idea or an 8-digit idea. And by the way, at the cost of what we're going to spend, 5-digit ideas shouldn't be done unless we need to do them for some other reason, like scalability or security or infrastructure, because the 5-digit ideas will never pay out. Let's keep going, right? So if it's going to drive upsell, here's your thing, 1,000 pounds a year. I can't tell you how many dozens or hundreds of really, really good ideas from marketing I've put a stake in the heart of, because when we do the math, it turns out it's not worth the cost of the meeting we just had, right? Reduce support costs. What's the swag on the tickets, right? You do the math and you figure out that if we can fix this in under a day, it's a good idea. If it's going to take us a month, let's not bother. And you guys know to within an order of magnitude whether it's a day, a month, or a year, right? And it's a way to do a quick sort so that we drop the 90% of things that we're never going to work on anyway, and don't do an engineering sizing, and don't do the whole project plan, right? We're going to keep going, right? Not accurate, not accurate, not accurate, not accurate, but it's really handy for sorting ideas because the folks who are proposing them think exactly this way. How many digits is it? And if we can speak in that same language, certainly as product folks and maybe as Agile and delivery folks, we can let go of 80% of the backlog because they actually make no sense. They don't pay out. Okay, let's keep going. Is it worth doing? Well, the question is it worth doing more than the things we already put in our roadmap or our commitment plan? Because those are the ones we have to sacrifice if we put something new in. All right, let's keep going. So I want you to look at a couple of different answers here. So this is me talking to the board of directors or the CEO about something that we shouldn't ever do. And one version looks like this. Right? It's a long sentence. If we pull the platform team off of our roadmap to do this big thing that you wanted, we're going to have to push back the new platform version by a quarter. Right? It's a fail. What did I fail to do? Anybody paying attention? There's something missing from this.
There's no numbers in it.
There's no currency symbol and there's no numbers, right? I call this showing up at a gunfight with a slide rule. Okay. I failed to understand even the conversational discussion. And so the folks around the table are going to tell me to just shut up and sit down and do the thing we've been asked to do, we're told to do. And my argument didn't hold any weight, right? But if we've done a little bit of preparation, I get to say something that looks like this, which is, remember at the beginning when we started this 3.0 platform, we had a thumbnail business case and we agreed it was worth something between 10 and $25 million a year. And we did that up front, okay? So if we delay this for a quarter, I can do the math or maths, depending on where you're from. If we delay this for a quarter, I think it's going to cost us 3 to 6 million. Okay, ooh, suddenly it got quiet. So tell me that the thing that you want to interrupt us for is worth more than 3 to 6 million for the company. Otherwise, it's a bad idea as an investor. Right? Notice what I didn't say was we're busy and there's backlogs and we're doing Scrum instead of Kanban instead of SAFe, right? Nobody cares. It lets me have an argument with the business side about what they care about, which is, should we do X or Y? Well, what's it worth? Notice this is not time delay. This is not numbers of sprints, right? It's money on the table. And if we've done the product work up front so that we have some vague idea that the platform work's going to be worth 8 digits, then we get to have this argument later every single week when they interrupt us because they've forgotten why we're doing the platform, right? If you think they're remembering everything on the roadmap, you live in a different world than I do. Okay, let's do another one, right? That's a great idea, but we're going to need to size the engineering work and do some product discovery, and that's going to take us a quarter, and right? So how important is this to you? Right? I've never seen an executive say anything then, it's really important to me. So skip all the steps and get to development because I'm an executive and it's important, right? We've all had this argument, right? So let's just give the alternative phrasing. Look, we've already pulled 30% of the entire engineering team off for these 2 projects, which you forgot about because you forgot about them, right? And if we pull anybody else off of this, we're going to have no new features in the core product next year. Okay, notice, and by the way, we had a bunch of forecasts about how much money we're going to make because of all the things that we forecasted were going to be in the product, right? So if you guys will agree that we won't have any new features in the product next year and hitting all our numbers is on the back of sales and marketing, then we're happy to take on this next new project, which makes no sense and hasn't been well thought out, right? The currency symbol and the number mean we're having a different discussion than I'm intransigent and you think I'm in your way because you're an exec who doesn't understand or care about development. Okay, we're almost done there. All right, so last thing, here's a picture of a roadmap. Anybody have roadmaps? Okay. I've done a couple of things on the roadmap. First of all, notice that the timelines across the top are not even. This is effectively a now, next, later roadmap, right? The other, if you're really, really clever on the left, you can see some things in green, which is when we agreed to have this whole work stream, which you're about to see, to reduce churn and improve onboarding, we agreed up front that we think the company might find 10 to 20 million if you would just let us do this work, right? And so I'm not going to entertain anything that's going to interrupt this work stream unless you're going to tell me it's as big as that and that you're going to understand that we're going to not get that for a while, right? And for each of the major things, and this doesn't work for the small bits, and you don't want to do this for the small ticket items, but for the 3 biggest things on your roadmap, someone, and it usually ends up being the chief product officer, has to stand up and say, we've agreed that this is vaguely what it's worth. And so before you blow up this row in the roadmap, you need to convince us that it's worth more to blow it up than to finish our plan, right? That's my job, is to protect you guys. Everybody with me? And then a couple of other things I did. Take a look at this. Notice that the stuff in the current quarter is big and bold and filled in, and the stuff in the next quarter is not quite as shaded. And anybody know what it means to have hashed lines around clouds at the end? Hint, we reserve the right to rearrange this as much as we want as long as we're meeting the goal on the left. And we're probably going to do that. So it's not a promise. It's not a guarantee. It's not a commitment. It's a work stream. And we're going to rearrange things as we learn, as we go. And anybody paying attention will notice that hashed lines with clouds are not guarantees. Right? When we put them all in the same boxes, we are effectively promising that we know what's going to happen 2 years from now, and I'm not that good. So when we present roadmaps to the folks who aren't interested in the details on, by the way, nothing in the boxes is of interest to anyone on the go-to-market side. They just want what's on the left. So we'll fill those in. Nobody knows, nobody cares, right? We're almost done. Last thing, because one of the objections you should have, I didn't hear yet, is there's a lot of stuff in our plan which is hard to monetize and hard to attach money to. You bet. And I like to hide that half, because here's my idea of a balanced R&D or engineering investment portfolio. About half the stuff, that's the purple stuff. About half the stuff is the things that the business asks for, demands, beats us up for, the things that real customers can see at the other end. New features, new products, new capabilities, new workflows. What do we have here, right? Anything that's visible to the outside world is in half of our budget, roughly speaking, right? And then the red part is all the things we have to do to keep our systems running and ourselves in the software business. Scalability, architecture, security, you fill it in. Notice that all those things are things that in general the go-to-market side does not appreciate and doesn't care about unless they break, right? They care about downtime, but they don't care about the investment to get to downtime. So as product folks and as Agile leaders, we need to keep roughly 40% of the budget for things that are going to keep us working, and we're not probably going to be able to attach money to those, but we're going to keep the conversation on the other side. What's the last two slices? Anybody? Again, I'm an enterprise guy. Every enterprise software company has a bunch of unplanned things that fall from the sky based on the deals we're working on this quarter. When that slice gets more than about 8 or 9%, it eats the rest of this pie and everything fails. So I'm always trying to keep it to between 5 and 8%. And I try to hide the capacity, because as soon as the sales folks find out we have any capacity, they sell it 20 times, right? We all know this. And then the last thing, which is maybe most important, closest to my heart, here's all the validation, here's the discovery, here's the customer interviews, here's the technical research, here's all the advanced work, which if we don't do them, everything falls apart next year. And so I jealously guard this and don't ever give my executives the chance to trade this away for anything else, because in a minute they will. And so if we think about this as a portfolio, we might actually have 3 or 4 different sets of criteria and different evaluation approaches, because the purple left side is what they care about, and the red and the gray stuff is what we have to protect so that we can do our jobs. All right, we're almost done. All right. Do I need to do this? I'm not even sure I need to do this. In my view, in my humble view, and I only have 35 years in product, none of my organizations ever have anybody whose title is product owner, ever. Because I believe when we split the work between the inward-looking product owner who ends up in a delivery job and the outward-looking product manager or business side person who doesn't care about how we do work, we're in an untenable situation, and we put our product owners in a job where that's really, really hard for them to succeed. Right. And if you open up the Scrum book and you see what it is that a product owner is supposed to do according to the Scrum book, you'll see that they prioritize stories and they write stories and they're available to the team at all times, which is going to be a problem for me in a minute. Here's what the Scrum product owner isn't assigned to do, and what all of my product managers do, right? They are not, I take all the proxies out. My product managers get to make calls, or we all quit. right? The proxy problem is where somebody who doesn't understand how the work is done and isn't close to the coal face and isn't with the team is making the decisions, and the product owner is stuck with them. Not the fault of the product owner, right? And the focus, therefore, is on productivity, not end value, because we're going to measure it in story points. We're going to measure it in sprints. We're not measuring it in the units that the company values. And then last thing, again, not throwing any shade on the folks with the titles. This is an organizational problem. There's no reward in the typical product owner job to actually do end user discovery, to go out and interview the folks who are going to use the stuff and find out what they need and whether it matches the spec. And so we end up building lots of things that are waste. In my organizations, all of the good product owners get promoted to product managers. We give them more money and we give them the right to go out and talk to the end users. Anybody who doesn't fit with that, we find another job for them in the company. But I believe that when we split the product management job into the business side and the product owner side, we're fundamentally hobbling our product owners in ways that make it really, really, really hard for them to succeed. Notice this isn't a personal criticism. So in my organizations, every single person in my organization, half of their job is to be product owner, and half of their job is to be out with real end users doing discovery so that we build fewer wasted things. And we're much more likely to get the thing that makes sense for the business and the organization and the delivery or R&D group, rather than being forced to take orders by folks who honestly couldn't care. So again, my job is to empower those folks, and part of it is to give them the inflated title that gives them permission to get out of the building and get out in the world and find out what's happening, instead of being the folks who are the recipients. And so the idea that they're available to the team at all times is a problem, because I want to send them out into the field for a week to find out what's really true, or a month, and they may miss some stand-ups. All right, we're almost done. Takeaways, right? I believe that product and development leaders, and here I'm speaking as a CPO or a VP of engineering, I think when we're talking to the go-to-market side, we have to talk about money and outcomes rather than process tutorials, because they're not interested in anything else. And we have to frame or choices. You guys are engineers. I can say exclusive or. I can't say that on the other side. Every choice is an exclusive or choice, because there's no slack, there's no white space, there's nobody sitting idle playing Fortnite and eating bonbons, right? So every choice has to be framed as an or choice that hurts. And the way we make it hurt is we attach money to the thing they're going to trade away, so they think 3 times. And for that, order of magnitude is good enough. Is it a few hundreds of thousands, or is it a few millions? Good enough to dissuade folks from blowing up the roadmap this week for something that doesn't matter. We almost done. And then the other one, I'm going to say it again and again. We keep reminding all the folks on the go-to-market side what's in the roadmap and what's in the releases and all the trains. They don't remember this because it's not important to them. And so in every single executive meeting, I have to recap the roadmap or the plan because they've forgotten it since last week. And it's not that they're stupid, it's that they're thinking about other things. And our expectation that they remembered everything we said, I think, is just not, it doesn't hold up. Okay, we're done, right? Okay, this is me. I don't know why. Yes, I bought my domain name in 1991, which is why it's my last name. I'm going to close this out. I put the PDF up so you guys can get it if you want it. Let's take a few minutes and some hard questions, because I hope I upset a few people, and there's a lot of holes in what I proposed. So just take yourself off of mute and jump. Go ahead, Ben.
We've got some in the chat, so
okay, good. Why don't you read them out of the chat?
Have a start for 10. So Suresh has asked, have you got some examples of companies where some of these elements have been used more?
Sure. I come from the commercial software world where we make software to make money on it, and that's a big difference. But I put this in place in 15 companies, right? You don't see it from the outside because the fist fights happen behind closed doors. Right. But this is how executives talk, and this is how executives argue. And you may not be in the room, but whoever the most senior person is on the engineering or delivery or product side is in that room. and needs to use words like these, because otherwise they get disinvited and you guys just get the memo.
Okay. Thank you, Rich. Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure, please, of course.
Yeah, I think in one of the slides, like if I understood correctly, like with the overall budget, you talked about 50% is the feature, 50% something, all other things.
Yep.
Is that like, okay, definitely like you have used that thing, because I'm in IT for 28 years. I have not seen any organizations, they're accepting that thing. That's a realistic figure.
So we could say, oh, we're going to spend 80% on features, and we know what happens, right?
Yeah, that's it. I'm just trying to understand, how did you convince that part? Like, okay,
So
I don't have any doubt about the figure.
yeah. So there's a long sales cycle here. Part of it is we want to do a little archaeology, and we want to dig up the last 25 really horrible outages that no one was working on fixing. And it's my job to push it in the faces of the executives and say, this is what happens when, right? Some of them still won't buy. I usually I don't present that pie chart, by the way, to the rest of the executive team, because they won't buy it. What I do is I focus all the attention on the half that has the features.
Yeah.
Right. It's a little bit of misdirection, but anytime I present to the go-to-market side execs the chance to trade away the future for the short term, they will always take that choice, right? And so there's lots of different sales techniques here. One of them, again, the embarrassment technique is to go down the list of really, really critical, horrible system failures and to explain to them that they're going to keep happening every week because we've underfunded it, right? Another one is to hide that half of the budget, right? And another one is to come back and attach long-term business value. So, for instance, at most organizations, we can figure out that outages are really expensive. I would hope, right?
Yeah.
But nobody's sitting down to put a number against it. Okay. So I come into the room and I say, by the way, we lost 100,000 banking customers last year because we had 12 outages, and the 100,000 banking customers cost us 10 billion euros. Okay. So it's up to you guys. We can keep doing this, right? I'm fine with losing 10 billion euros a year on outages, but I don't think you guys are happy because you can't retire to Malta as soon or to Fiji as soon because you're missing all your goals. So let's talk about what we're going to invest in that's going to reduce your pain, right? Notice that until the sentence had a currency symbol in it, they didn't care.
Thank you.
Right? It's a translation and communications problem first for me. It's not an R&D problem.
Yeah. Rich?
Go.
Let me start by saying I've enjoyed your presentation, but as someone who has spent a lot of their career communicating with executives, I was a former Fortune 50 controller.
Okay.
We were always acutely aware of minuscule, unitized costs for things.
Yes.
So we knew exactly how much a phone
You knew what it cost. You didn't know what it was worth. Yes.
Well, they were costs. They didn't generate revenues. But my question to you, because I know I really applaud this direction, because I think it's positive for Agilists to hear.
Yes. Yes.
However, in your early examples, you referred to what I would call non-public information. So, for instance, if you're going to have the number of system outages, that's usually, if you parse a 10K, you're not going to find
okay.
information.
I think that's correct. I think back to Suresh's point, if what we're trying to do is we're trying to get some engineering teams or some R&D teams to reduce the number of outages internally, right? We're not sharing this outside the company. That's an internal savings story, or that's an internal revenue story where I'm hoping that people within the company know how many outages we're having and know what the business impact of those outages are. And so we're not going to tell the outside world that we're putting 2 or 3 engineering teams on reducing outages. We're going to do the work, right?
Yes. Well, my question to you as presumably an internal consultant is, do you, is it your normal experience that you have access to that sort of non-public information, even
Oh,
as
I
an
see.
insider, because most places I've worked, you would not.
Okay. I guess I've been privileged. When I come in as the chief product officer, on an interim basis, there is nothing they won't give me. Right now,
Okay, so
I wouldn't tell the world, but
so just a question of
sure.
scale. So are you talking about, you mentioned Silicon Valley.
Yes.
I understand that in a smaller organization or startup, you have a whole lot less sensitive non-public information, but
So
you wouldn't get within a mile of that at British Telecom or
okay,
AT&T
so
or
I did a bunch of
bank.
work. I did a bunch of work with an e-commerce company here in Europe, and I won't tell you their name, right? But they're a European e-commerce company, and I was able to work with the chief product officer, and we were able to estimate the cost of outages and shipping delays and out of stock, right?
Okay, so you answered my question right there. So there was an individual who had access to that information, and you had access to that individual.
Sure. And let me frame it in the business term. So her job as the chief product officer of this e-commerce company was to help them make more money and lose less money, right?
Yeah.
And so asking questions like how many of our boxes are returned unopened and we have to junk, right? We have to throw away is a C-level question that nobody gets to duck. Now, if you're deep in the organization and you're working on that project, you may or may not have access to that. But the folks who are green lighting it, I would say they must and they should. I wouldn't approve two million to be spent on some project if we couldn't find enough data to show that we were going to get a 4x return on that and it was worth 8 million.
Okay, so I guess, again, I don't want to talk too much, but
Sure.
But for people who work at a team level, because I do understand what you're saying.
Sure, right.
But if you're working in an organization for a team, am I correct in paraphrasing you to say that at the onset you need to have an empowered stakeholder to provide a source of information?
Yeah, and when we say stakeholder, I'm usually thinking about the folks who want it approved and don't care about how much it's going to cost. I'm thinking about the executives or the leaders on the delivery side. So if I think about the empowered head of engineering or product or R&D or whatever it's called, I think that, and I've been in that job a bunch of times, that's where it hits the road. If we've got stakeholders who are demanding things and won't play enough to help justify them, then who's the person who says no? And in every organization it's different, but in general, when I hear the word stakeholder, what I hear is somebody who wants the work and isn't interested in how it gets done. All right, we're going to move on.
Thanks. Yeah,
Sure.
Thanks very much, Steve, for the question.
And yes, Steve,
thanks for
I'll agree with you completely. If you're at the team level, what you need is somebody up the stream from you who's able to drive.
I'm just going to squeeze one more in.
Good, go.
So this is from Helen, but I think she's hit something that we're very aware of as Agile coaches. So with your money swag, your early swag
Yes.
money story in the early stages, how frequently do you advise revisiting it? Or how often is that revisited? I know in my work, I'm very cautious that as soon as someone puts some kind of costing on it, that becomes the absolute gospel. And I've gone into businesses where they swear that there's X amount of benefit, and you're looking and going, yeah, we burnt through that
Right.
because your delivery's been blooming slow. So how do you address revisiting it and keeping that current and alive?
So at those gross levels, we don't need to look at that more than every quarter or two. And by the way, it should always be a range. Should never be an exact number. It should always be a range because everyone should be reminded every time they look at it that it's an estimate, right? And in general, I'm trying to get the go-to-market side folks or the consuming folks to agree with and confirm what it is. It turns out not to matter if we're off by 60%. It turns out to matter a lot if we're off by 5x. So I wouldn't spend a lot of energy revising these unless we thought we learned something that was going to make it dramatically different.